Hello, and thank you very much for participating with me today on our discussion of an oral technique called the silent discussion. This technique, prior to taking this course, I've never heard of it before. And when I have come across it and researched about it, and I pictured using it in my own room, I fell in love with it. I thought, wow, what a great strategy for students who are shy or timid to be able to participate without having to necessarily verbally discuss with another person. I just think it's a wonderful strategy to do, and I would love to use it within my own classroom. This technique really stood out to me because, myself, when I was in high school, I was kind of shy. I was a little timid, and I did not necessarily always enjoy participating in verbal discussions or in large group discussions. And so now, as an educator myself, I think to myself and wonder, how can I engage my shy students and still let them know that I hear their voice, that I am thinking of them, that I have not forgotten about them. So this is a great way to include those quiet, reserved students as well. I would like to start off today's presentation with a video. Here you will see a group of 9th graders who are participating in a silent discussion. Now, there are many different ways of doing this technique. Here is one way I will show you, and then we will discuss it.
That's 1 minute.
Oh.
Time's half up. You should be adding to your own by now. $60 seconds. Finishing up yours so you can turn it in.
So let's just talk about this video for a minute. Here you noticed the teacher called time, right? And you still heard a few mumblings here and there. So it's not necessarily a total silent discussion, but maybe their version of a silent discussion nonetheless. There wasn't too much verbal activity going on. Now, as you can see, the students were using construction paper, and each student had his or her own writing utensil. And notice that the students just kind of were walking around. They would look at what was on the poster or the construction paper and write it on the paper. There wasn't a certain group where students would rotate clockwise. She just kind of had her students, every man for himself. They just went from poster to poster or construction paper to construction paper on their own. Not necessarily a method or technique that I would use with my students, especially with freshmen. Depending on the class size, I would probably have my students travel in a group together. It would just seem a little more organized. But every teacher utilizes his or her own technique. That was just one way of how the silent discussion is used. So let's go through the steps, and I will tell how a version that I would use of the silent discussion method. Step 1, select a topic. The topic could come from any source. It could be coming from the reading of a text. So perhaps it's directly from the main piece of literature, such as a novel or a short story. It could be a current issue that's going on in the news. Perhaps whatever issue is going on is relatable to the text or the novel. Many times when my co-teacher and I plan our lessons, we do it based on whatever novel or short story is reading. So it's a novel-driven unit. So it could be a current issue going on, controversial topic in the news, or anything relatable to the students, anything that's engaging, anything that the students like. And this would come from a reading inventory that's done at the beginning of the school year. And whatever genre the students or topic the students seem to enjoy, that's what this discussion would be based off of. Step 2, arranging the classroom. Now, the students could have a couple of ways in terms of how they're supposed to sit. One way is that a whole class would sit in a large circle, okay? And this is done if perhaps, maybe if you have 20 to 25 students, it could work. Similar to perhaps if you're doing a Socratic seminar, okay? So students would sit in one circle, okay? This is probably the more common method. Or if you have a larger group, students would arrange themselves in small groups of 4 or 5. That way, especially if you're in a larger classroom, perhaps if you're teaching in the post-secondary classroom where you would have a large amount of students, you can arrange the students in smaller groups of 4 and 5. Then that way you know that everyone will have a turn and have a chance to be heard. The next step, generate questions. Okay, so how you would do it, each student should write at least 2 questions on a blank sheet of paper. Now, the teacher would give each student this blank sheet of paper, and each student is to write 2 questions. One question can be literal, so it can be a question that's derived from the text, so explicitly from the text, okay? However, one question must at least be inferential, meaning students will have to analyze and critically think when they give their response. I would encourage my students to try not to ask yes or no questions, but more so questions that would generate thought, that would generate a discussion. Because after all, that's what it's all about. It's a silent discussion. Next, once the students are given enough time to generate their 2 questions, it's time for them to pass their blank sheet of paper to the next person. And this will be done clockwise. Okay? So once they pass it, you would allow enough time for the students to answer the 2 questions that is written on the sheet of paper. And you can can give the students about 3 to 5 minutes to answer those questions. Next, you would have the students pass the questions clockwise again, okay? And the students can either respond to a response from the previous student, or that student is more than welcome to write a new question. And this pattern would continue to go along until the sheet of paper is returned back to its original owner, okay? Now, as you can see, this method that I would use is a little different from the teacher in the video. You know, she just had her students walking freely around the room, looking at the questions and answering. I would do it, I think this is a more organized fashion, where I would just have the students sit in a circle and just pass the blank sheets of paper around. The way in which the teacher in the video did it would be called almost like a gallery, okay? There are also other gallery walks where you can have chart paper on the wall, and students can silently on the wall add their responses or generate new questions. And one thing I would encourage is that if you notice on this sheet of paper, the ink is written in different colors. And so I would encourage each student to try to use a different type of ink color, perhaps red, blue, black, green ink, just something where you can visually see the different mini conversations that's going on. Okay. The next step would be to summarize the discussion. Okay. Really a time of debriefing or just reviewing with the class. Now is the time in which you can allow the students to talk orally, or you can continue the silent way and just have the students answer the questions in writing. Basically asking, such as, what types of questions were written? What stood out to you? Do you like this technique? Should we use this again in the future? And this is just a great way of evaluating and assessing how the students enjoyed this technique. I thoroughly enjoy this activity. I would actually love to use it with my sophomores in the upcoming school year. And I think that the students, my shy students especially, would thoroughly enjoy this activity. In addition, those students who are outgoing, it's a great way to help teach them how to listen to others as well, and just to kind of sit back and just write down their thoughts rather than speaking aloud so many times. So I thank you once again for being here with me today and for taking part in this discussion of the silent discussion. Have a good evening, everyone.